be brave if you're brave. I'll be brave, but only if you're brave. Yeah, we can both be heroes, like soldiers in their nice clothes, like soldiers in their nice clothes, together. And it could be just you and me. We'll be family. Just wait and see. So I will fight if you'll fight. Yeah, I will fight, but only if you'll fight. Oh, we can make it through this, like sailors in a tempest, like sailors in a tempest, together. And it could be just you and me. We'll be family. Just wait and see. So I'll be brave if you're brave. I'll be brave, but only if you're brave.
So welcome, everybody. It's so great to see you all here tonight, especially considering the weather that you all traversed to get here. I'm so grateful. So we have an amazing panel tonight. And, you know, as Danielle said, you know, we believe that patients are the answer to survival, from the beginning all the way through the end. We need to hear from you. You need what you're experiencing. And we need to be able to pass that on as well as, you know, to other entities that are working on clinical trials and working on, you know, programs for you, for your survival. We've recently, and Amy's going to tell you a little bit more about this in a little while, but we've recently been working on clinical trials for patients. Patients are helping design the protocols. They're helping to design trials for just their needs by their genomic marker, not just in general, but by their genomic marker. So we have an illustrious panel here tonight. Don Stranathan, who's been here before, but have you been on a panel before here?
Last year, actually.
Okay.
A year ago today.
Okay. Don has kind of a very different experience with his lung cancer that he'll share. And we have Terry Kennedy, who is an EGFR patient. We've got Andy Trahan, who is an ALK patient. And I'm sure you all know Janet Freeman-Daly because she has also been here before, and she is a Ross Wonder. We also have Lisa Goldman over here, a Ross Wonder, but she doesn't like to sit up here. Right. But we may get her up here before the night is over. And we have our illustrious Amy Moore, who is our medical officer for the Adario Lung Cancer Foundation. So we'll start with you, Don. Where in your diagnosis did you hear about genomic profiling, which you already just said? And did you have testing prior to treatment or after? When did you begin to understand the importance of being tested?
Well, and I heard about comprehensive genomic sequencing from Bonnie, and that was November 2015. I understood the importance of testing immediately after I was diagnosed. And so I actually went back to the facility I was being treated at and asked if I could have that tissue tested. But the tissue there wasn't enough tissue on one biopsy, and they couldn't find the other one. So I just resolved myself to wait and see. When I did have progression, I knew testing was the first thing I wanted. And I understood also that cancer can mutate when it's being exposed to a treatment. So I thought, you know, I'd want a new testing anyway. So, but the comprehensive sequencing was, my first one was in November of 2015. Since then, I've had like 6 different sequencing test, either blood, liquid, or tissue.
Thank you. Terry, do you want me to read the question again, or are you okay?
I think I got it.
Okay, good.
I was very fortunate because when I was diagnosed, I knew nothing about genomic testing or what the importance of it was. And the doctor that did my biopsy said, you know, we're sending it to Foundation One, and my oncologist told me about it. And I'm like, okay. So that, again, very fortunate. So right at the time of diagnosis, I had genomic testing done. My tumor was so large, my oncologist wanted me to go ahead with starting chemo right away before I even knew the results of the genomic testing. So I did 2 rounds of chemo. Then in that time, I got the results back. It was EGFR positive. So changed over to an EGFR treatment. And since then, I've been tested many a times, both blood and tissue, as things have progressed and changed. And now I know the value of it.
And you know, it's very important when you're first diagnosed and you do start the discussion about testing, that you ask what kind of a test. Because sometimes a physician will say, we're going to send your tumor out for testing, but they may be only testing for certain markers. They might be only testing for EGFR or ALK. You know, it's really just been in the last couple of years that ROS1 has been a standard to check. And now we have many other markers. So you want to make sure that they're testing for every marker possible, including immunotherapy.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing. The time I was diagnosed, I had a blood biopsy and a tissue biopsy. I did a blood biopsy because that would come back sooner. My blood biopsy came back with no identified markers. So lesson learned there. And then, you know, a week or 2 later, the tissue biopsy came back and with a marker that and a treatment that I was very responsive to. So be careful to cover all your bases at the
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Terry, because you know, when you have a blood-based test, if there is something there, you can know and rely on the fact that it is there. Mm-hmm. If there's nothing there, you need to make sure you go back and back it up with a tissue test, because it's not always, you know, and the same thing can happen actually with a tissue test. It can come back, you know, no marker, because they haven't gotten into the core of the biopsy or what have you. So be aggressive, ask all the questions, make sure, you know, you're getting the right answers for your particular cancer. Andy?
Okay, I'm like Terry. I was diagnosed and I knew nothing about the markers, but my doctor did. And so he sent it off to just 100 miles down the road, and we got the results back really quick. It wasn't the full panel, but ALK was one of the things that he tested for. So it came back, and then I was on crizotinib. That was the very first thing I took. I didn't even have any chemo before. And as far as blood biopsies go, I mean, that I've had a couple of those and they were negative. And my cancer, the only progression has been in my central nervous system and my bones. That's it. I don't have anything that they can just go biopsy. I don't have any tumors like that. So it's been almost impossible to get into any clinical trial, and just so many things are more difficult with that situation. But I've got another blood biopsy scheduled, and we're gonna try to get a bone biopsy. My latest.
I was just going to say you can get a biopsy in a bone.
Yeah, my latest scans showed that there was some what they call it, soft tissue attached to the bone.
Okay.
Or attached to the tumor that was attached to the bone.
Okay.
So.
Janet?
So my situation's a little different. At the time I was diagnosed, EGFR testing had become standard of care, and I was at Virginia Mason Hospital in Seattle, which it does a really good job, but they only know what's in the standard of care. So they tested for EGFR. And being a research geek, I had gone and found out about ALK testing, and I asked about that, and they hadn't planned to do it, but they did send it at my request. And they were both negative. So I had been doing more reading online with other patients, and at that time, they were just starting to try and look at other mutations that were available. There was a study called the Lung Cancer Mutation Consortium, and they were testing a 10-gene panel and trying to find how frequently these different mutations came up, and then also that was helping them guide people into clinical trials. So when I progressed, despite having curative treatment, I had a whole lot of tissue, fortunately, because they'd taken out a couple of lymph nodes. And I called to ask if I could be part of that trial, and they just finished up their funding. But the University of Colorado, despite the fact I couldn't fly out there because I had this big hollow tumor, they were worried something would happen, allowed me to enroll in the trial, and then they found a way to cover the funding through their testing lab, and they did the 10-gene panel. And I came up negative for everything, so I went on for more testing, for more treatment. But research continues, and they keep finding new markers. So I had heard from another patient online who was at Massachusetts General Hospital in a clinical trial for a new gene. It was so new, it hadn't been published, so he couldn't even tell me the name of it. But he says, "You really ought to get tested for this." It's like, right. How do I do that? Then I found they published the paper January 2012, which was about 6 months after I got diagnosed, and named it ROS1. And he said, well, it tends to show up in patients like you that are relatively young, thank you, adenocarcinoma, negative for the other mutations. You might check it out. So I went to my Seattle doctor and said, I want to get tested for ROS1. And he says, what's ROS1? And I gave him the paper. And there was no way to get tested for it. The only place testing was at Massachusetts General Hospital, and you had to be their patient. So, I just kind of sat on that for a while. And then when I had finished my second treatment, or my second line of treatment, and they did the scans and found out that I'd again progressed, I had already planned to go out and visit my nephew. And then while I was visiting him, I said, gee, I'm in Denver. The University of Colorado is in Denver. And I sent an email to the head of the study to say, can I come over and say thank you for letting me be in this study? Because they didn't have to since I couldn't travel there. And they said, Dr. Bum will come meet with you in the lobby tomorrow morning. So I gave him permission to test. And the next week we did a bronchoscopy, but we couldn't get any more information. And the next day I get an email from Dr. Bunn saying, you have an amazing ROS1 rearrangement. We have room in a clinical trial. And my pulmonologists in Seattle took it to the tumor board that night, and they couldn't conclude what it was for sure. So we had to wait for a month to see if anything grew before I could do anything about the clinical trial.
Wow.
And one nodule that was too small to biopsy didn't do anything, but the other one grew by 50% in 4 weeks. And they said, go for the trial. It's either that or be on chemo for the rest of your life. I said, we're doing the trial. And my very first scan, everything was gone. So I've responded really well to crizotinib, and I'm still on it.
Thank you, Janet. That's a great story. I prepared all these questions, but I forgot to put one in here.
Did you want to get
Yeah, Jeff. Well, he didn't really have a, Do you have anything to add to that, Jeff?
My story is a little bit different. I didn't have a marker that they could target, but it was immunotherapy. So mine was, originally it was PD-L1. I had a high expression, so that's why I got on the trial for it. Come to find out, though, and I do work closely with Foundation Medicine now, there's also a high mutational burden. So I did not have any targetable mutations. But I had, I forget what it was, 17 or so mutations, which I remember the conversation at first was kind of disappointment of, I'm sorry, we don't have anything, and there's a lot, so it's really kind of odd. now come to find out that it's why I've done as well as I have on immunotherapy, and it's still the same type of marker as it is. It's just not a direct mutation.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's so true and so important. For everybody on the panel, real quickly, because I've got more questions, and then we want to get to some trials. When did it dawn on you to get a second opinion? And did you ever get a second opinion? Let's start with Terry.
Oh, goodness. I think it dawned on me in the beginning, just because I'm the type that wants the more knowledge, more analysis. That's kind of my background. Let's see, I saw a second opinion, UCSF, Stanford pretty quickly, but more importantly, I think I was once I had progression and needed to decide on new treatment options was I was really active at seeking out second opinions and what other people were doing.
Andy?
We got a second opinion because we didn't like our oncologist in his bedside manner. And so we left that appointment. My dad started looking all over, and he found Ross Camage in Denver, and we hightailed it over to him, and we still communicate with him and talk to him about my scans today.
And do you think that second opinion changed the therapies you were to go on from that point on?
I wouldn't say changed, but some things I might not have done without him, I've done, and it's worked out.
That's a change.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Janet?
Since I was deemed curable and there was a standard of care for that, and I was at like the best hospital with a safety record and a great doctor in Seattle, I honestly didn't go after a second opinion. It wasn't until I was stage 4 and I realized nobody knows how to fix me that then I started looking into second opinions. Okay. And by getting connected to the University of Colorado, I found Ross Camage.
So now, Amy, you've got to kind of talk about the ROS1 study we're doing and the EGFR study and you know what we're working on for ALCS as well.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here tonight. And I think, you know, we want to back up just a little bit and give some context for the organization and Bonnie's, you know, her vision in creating the foundation back in 2006, and then realizing, you know, a couple of years into it that there was more that we could do, and that research really held the key to all of this for patients. And so out of that, you know, they convened kind of the key thought leaders in the lung cancer space, and the Adaria Lung Cancer Medical Institute was born in 2008 to help propel innovative research that really could do what we're seeing today, help patients live longer. And then as Bonnie's, you know, visibility in the lung cancer community grew, she was approached by patients who were young dealing with lung cancer. And, you know, this was something that for doctors was an anomaly. You know, we shouldn't see 20-year-olds walking in the door with lung cancer, and they went through this, you know, doctor to doctor kind of bouncing around, being misdiagnosed, mistreated, because who suspects that an otherwise healthy young person might have lung cancer? So we started digging into that, looking at what are the genomics of young lung cancer, and found that these patients, typically under the age of 40, who are healthy, maybe, you know, have you know, background as an athlete or a marathon runner, that they had a higher rate of actionable driver mutations than the general public. So there was something uniquely different about lung cancer in these young patients. And so from that, we're beginning to query what are the reasons for that? Why would this happen in these young patients? And can we identify the exposures or the risks that may be accounting for this kind of uniquely different lung cancer in young people? And then as Bonnie's, you know, visibility in the lung cancer community grew, she was approached by patients who were young dealing with lung cancer. And, you know, this was something that for doctors was an anomaly. You know, we shouldn't see 20-year-olds walking in the door with lung cancer, and they went through this, you know, doctor to doctor kind of bouncing around, being misdiagnosed, mistreated, because who suspects that an otherwise healthy young person might have lung cancer? So we started digging into that, looking at what are the genomics of young lung cancer, and found that these patients, typically under the age of 40, who are healthy, maybe, you know, have you know, background as an athlete or a marathon runner, that they had a higher rate of actionable driver mutations than the general public. So there was something uniquely different about lung cancer in these young patients. And so from that, we're beginning to query what are the reasons for that? Why would this happen in these young patients? And can we identify the exposures or the risks that may be accounting for this kind of uniquely different lung cancer in young people? And so as word of that kind of got out in the lung cancer community, then the Ross Wonders heard about you know, the work we were doing in the young lung cancer space. So they approached Bonnie and they said, help us. You know, we want to do research. We need to figure out what's going on with ROS1 cancer. You know, lung cancer wasn't just one big pie anymore. We were beginning to understand that there were these driver mutations, but they still accounted for, you know, 1-2%, you know, just a small fraction of that entire picture. So Ross Wonders came to us, and we worked closely with them to help them figure out where were the needs and the opportunities and the gaps in that space, working with Janet, working with Lisa to say, what can we do? And so from that, we identified a couple of opportunities, working with investigators at Vanderbilt University, Dr. Christine Lovely, with Bob Doble at the University of Colorado, to develop model systems. Again, we need ways that we can study these tumors beyond just working with patients. So we were able to capture some of the tissues that were left over when these patients would come in for procedures, for biopsies, and any tissue that was left over after all the treatments and all the important things were taken care of. We said, we can take that and make it be of good use. So we could create, for example, what we call patient-derived xenograft mouse models. We can take a piece of the patient's tissue and plant it into a mouse that has a compromised immune system. And all that means is that we can more closely mimic a patient's cancer in a mouse model. And by doing that, we can begin to, you know, look at how does that tumor grow in this model, how, you know, what are drugs that might be good candidates to fight that, you know, and so it really helps us ask questions that we couldn't ask otherwise. And then we similarly did that in the context of cell lines. Can we create patient-derived cell lines by taking a piece of tissue and growing it in plates, in an incubator, in special media, and that mimics some of the hallmarks of that patient's cancer. And that's particularly useful for discovery of new drugs, for example. And so, again, working closely with the patients, this organization was created as a family foundation, and we don't take that lightly. You know, this room is a family, and, you know, we have earned your trust, we value that, and we view you as, what would I want for my sister, my mom, my dad? And so every decision I think that we think about comes back to what Bonnie said at the beginning, is it good for the patient? And so, you know, we were able to help the Ross Wonders come together and settle on these projects. And today, you know, we're still looking to get that word out there. And we would say to ROS1 patients in the community, if you know that you're ROS1, you have a procedure coming up, we have a hotline you can call, and then we'll make that information available. But call Nurse Alicia and get the information you need. We'd love to enroll you in this study and help you be an active participant in advancing research into ROS1 cancer. Similarly, for the EGFR patients, we were approached by them, as Terry explained not too long ago, and we did a similar process where we engaged with the key thought leaders in this lung cancer space, linked up with Dr. Paziane at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and with both of these studies, with ROS1 and EGFR, we're working with a company called Champions Oncology. And again, a determination was made that we need better and more models to advance research into EGFR cancer. Again, their approach was we need PDX mouse models, and there were specific mutations among EGFR patients that Dr. Yane was interested. So patients with, example, the T790M mutation that have progressed after treatment on osimertinib, the L858R mutation, exon 19 deletion, as well as patients with HER2 or exon 20 insertion mutations for which there aren't really any good TKI options out there. So again, we're trying to collect patients' samples for these specific EGFR patients. Again, we have a hotline you can call if you're interested in learning more about that study or might be a participant for that. So, we'll make that information available. So all of this is really reflective of the power of an advocacy organization coming together with patients who are committed advocates for research and linking up with the top investigators in the field to ask what are the gaps, how can we address those gaps, and then through the infrastructure of the Adair Lung Cancer Medical Institute, we can rapidly execute on these innovative studies. We can do these clinical trials that nobody else is doing. We have the infrastructure to deliver on those in a timely way. We have, data repositories, we have biospecimen repositories, so we have unique assets that allow us to get out there and address spaces that we feel are making a difference in moving the needle for these unique patient populations.
Oh, I'll be brave if you're brave. I'll be brave, but only if you're brave. Yeah, we can both be heroes, like soldiers in their nice clothes, like soldiers in their nice clothes, together. And it could be just you and me. We'll be family. Just wait and see. So I will fight if you'll fight. Yeah, I will fight, but only if you'll fight. Oh, we can make it through this, like sailors in a tempest, like sailors in a tempest, together. And it could be just you and me. We'll be family. Just wait and see. So I'll be brave if you're brave. I'll be brave, but only if